Good afternoon, Chicago. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and this is Reset. It's Friday, so you know what time it is. It's time to catch up on what's been happening lately across Chicago and Illinois in our weekly news recap. And that's where we take you behind the headlines with local journalists working on stories like these.
Growing turmoil in the mayor's office.
The power struggle at Chicago Public Schools taking a new twist tonight. CEO Pedro Martinez rebuffing another move to replace him.
Former mayor's office staff are coming forward about a former top official who's been accused of sexual harassment, sexism, and racism.
The Johnson administration started at $300 million in property taxes, then lowered it to $150. Now it's at $68 million. But that's not all of the changes we're learning about. Not even close.
Here to help make sense of the week's news, Melody Mercado, a reporter covering the Loop, West Loop, River North, and the Gold Coast for Block Club Chicago. Hey, Melody, welcome back.
Hey.
Good to see you. Also here, Mitch Armentrout, government and politics reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. Hey, Mitch.
Great to see you again.
And we've got Chicago Tribune investigative reporter Ray Long. Good to have you back, Ray.
Good to be here, Sasha.
So with just over 3 weeks left to pass a budget, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and the City Council remain divided over how to close this budget gap. Are they getting any closer to a compromise, Mitch?
It's hard to say because this really is changing by the hour. Even right before we went on air, we saw some folks in the City Hall press corps releasing some details on the mayor's latest proposals. Of course, this has been sort of brewing for the last month or so, more than that probably, when Brandon Johnson's office revealed that they're facing almost $1 billion shortfall in next year's budget. So they have to pass a spending plan by the end of the year, which gives us, 3 weeks or so to make that happen.
Right.
And basically, Mayor Johnson's first proposal called for a $300 million property tax increase, which literally every single alderman in the city rejected in a pretty unprecedented vote. So Johnson tried to lower that in half. They didn't like that either. Now that number, as far as the property tax increase, is around $68 million. But as far as making other cuts and raising other revenues, i.e. taxes on residents, the latest ideas we're seeing from the mayor's office would be increasing the tax on ride shares like Lyft and Uber downtown. That's certainly going to be fought really hard by those companies. The mayor's office is proposing an increase in the bag tax, plastic bags in stores from 7 cents to 10 cents. So really, the city's looking for a lot of different ways to sort of make up this gap. And I would assume that, it's fair to say that aldermen are going to come back with different proposals in the next days as really this crunch time sort of gets crunchier.
Yeah, because what else can he do? Because alders are calling for different budget cuts than what Johnson's proposing.
Well, it's all exacerbated by the whole idea that he came out in his campaign said we don't need a property tax increase. So then he comes out and says, we're not going to cut any workers. That's a noble goal. Everybody, especially unions, would be for that. But he has not shown that he's the great collaborator that he says he is yet. In fact, a great collaborator would have probably had this done before they even presented it to the council or rolled it out for the press.
Right. Do you think, Melody, that it's safe to assume that there will be some sort of property tax increase when all is said and done?
I think it's possible that we'll see a slight property tax increase. If anything, I think this shows that everything is negotiable. As we've seen this shrink from $300 million to about $68 million, and we've seen that Johnson has really had to kind of give up some of his priorities, which have included, another possibility is giving up the basic income program and some money for small businesses. That all of these are being bankrolled by the federal pandemic relief dollars. That could possibly be turned back around and given back to the city to maybe lessen this $68 million even more. But yeah, negotiations.
They continue.
Right.
And the council, Mitch, are they meeting next Wednesday and Friday to try to pass this budget?
So they're going to try, Brandon Johnson's going to try and get some of these proposals before the council next week and start, because the budget sort of is a series of different votes that it gets pretty arcane. But it's going to take us several attempts to try and make this go through. We'll get a concrete proposal in the days ahead.
Now, go ahead.
Mitch, correct me here, but if they don't get this done by the end of the year, this could hurt their financial ability to borrow and could hurt their ratings.
Right.
Overall,
And the city's already faced a few credit downgrades in the last few years. So it's pretty dire. And by state law, they need to have a budget and plan in place by January 1st. So it might be a kind of busy a working holiday for a lot of folks in the
Right.
city.
Well, and while all this is happening, the mayor's also been dealing with turmoil within his own staff. Ray, your Tribune colleagues actually broke the story on complaints against Johnson's fired communications director, Ronnie Reese. What are the details?
Well, the details are many, and they roll out into questions of misogynistic behavior, sexual harassment, sexist behavior, etc., and a lot of etc. And it also goes back to how there were people fired from his communications staff who were then put on the do not hire list, which is remarkable in itself. But then you see him getting fired over all these types of behaviors, and you have a backlash over these people being put on the do not hire list.
Yeah.
So then the council says, hey, we ought to be making it easier to get people off the do not hire list who are wrongly put on the do not hire list. And some of them have been removed, as I understand it. And now it's one more example of this mayor not really having full control of what's going on. And he says he didn't even know about it, which is almost impossible to believe.
Well, let me pause you there because we do have some tape to support what you just revealed there. One of the folks who was fired by Ronnie Reese is Ashley Rodriguez. She's the daughter of two Chicago police officers who got a job in former Mayor Lori Lightfoot's press office, only to be put on what you mentioned is this do not hire list under the Johnson administration. Now, she joined other fired Lightfoot staffers who were put on that list. They were at a press conference on Tuesday.
It completely ruined a future that I would have. And so it's not fair to me. And for the people behind me, it's not fair for them either.
And let's make sure we're all on the same page. Give us a quick refresher. What is this do not hire list, Ray?
Well, if you do something, egregious, you are generally placed on this list that says you cannot be rehired by the city. So there are these kinds of things in other places like state government too. But it's not a mark you want on your record,
right,
especially if you don't deserve it. And in this case, by all accounts that we've read so far, these people did not deserve being on that list. So it looks more political because, as you noted, Sasha, these folks were hired under Lightfoot's administration. And then you have just this whole jumble of things that are going on in the administration that are head-scratching, if not worse.
Yeah, two aldermen and mayoral critics joined those fired press staffers on Tuesday. I want to play a little bit of what we have from 36th Ward Alderman Gilbert Villegas.
There's a lot of inconsistencies around this do not hire list, and it's very, very, very gray. And so what Alderman Wagisback and the rest of us are going to do is put some guardrails around here to make sure there's more transparency around this process.
A lot of scrutiny right now about this list, but I mean, have previous administrations also been accused of misusing or abusing the list?
I had not heard of it.
I can't recall a specific instance of this where the motivation feels so blatantly political. I mean, like Ray was saying, like the do not hire list is generally reserved for like police officers accused of serious misconduct and found culpable of it, or folks in city government who've faced criminal charges, like really things that you're not going to get hired after that.
Right.
So it's kind of, I think what's more troubling even, the mayor's claim that he didn't know about these allegations. One, it's hard to believe, but two, if it is true, I mean, these allegations have been there. His office, certainly some folks in his office have been aware of them for more than a year.
Right.
So that might be even a more troubling admission, I guess.
Well, let's go back to Ronnie Reese, right? The Johnson's fired communications director, which is where all of this sort of got unearthed and started. I mean, how is Ronnie Reese responding to the allegations, Melody?
I don't believe I've seen anything specifically from him. Although I would have to I believe there was a statement, but I'm not.
Yeah. So Ronnie, he's categorically denied any claims of wrongdoing, and he's pointed to his long career working alongside women and folks from various backgrounds, dating back to his time at the Chicago Teachers Union, which is where he first kind of became a close confidant of Mayor Johnson. So he maintains, he did nothing wrong here.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it's kind of troubling. Just the way this whole situation has played out just raises more questions about how this office sort of functions or doesn't function.
Right.
And there's at least 3 internal complaints that we know of that have been made against him since the beginning of the year. And we know that Johnson's chief of staff was aware of this, and she was directed to handle this with people that on the press team, and she was within documentations from the mayor's office. It shows that she was supposed to give him, Ronnie Reese, a verbal warning. So again, find it hard to believe that the mayor himself did not know that this was going on with Ronnie Reese when his own chief of staff was in charge of handling it.
Well, correct me too. She was the one who said that we should have peace circles to try to work this out,
well,
whatever that is.
They had a peace circle.
Okay. And how did that go?
and not very well. People did not feel...
Right, the employees basically said that nothing changed
Nothing
after that.
changed.
Yeah. And I could see how that could go the wrong way, too. And Johnson is also talking about how, well, I've inherited all these policies from prior administrations. But, Lori Lightfoot had put in sexual harassment training and a variety of other things to make sure there was a better environment, and that is something that hasn't been really emphasized by this administration because he's looking to pass the blame.
Right. If you're just tuning in, this is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. We're going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Melody Mercado of Block Club Chicago, Mitchell Armentrout of the Chicago Sun-Times, and Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune. Now, let's turn to Chicago Public Schools, shall we? This week, your Tribune colleagues, Ray, they reported that the new school board offered CPS CEO Pedro Martinez a buyout. Now, how did he react to that?
Well, he didn't like it, or he didn't take it anyway. Pedro Martinez is basically standing as the guy in the gap here, or the wall between an effort to try to get a $300 million loan okayed by CPS. He says that's going to put them in financial difficulties, more financial difficulties than they're already in. And, of course, we know that the previous board resigned. The mayor had trouble putting everybody together with a clean slate. He finally got everybody on. The board is now urging some kind of effort to get rid of Martinez, and Martinez is not going. He doesn't have to go. They have to fire him for cause, which they don't have a cause other than, hey, he's fiscally responsible.
Yeah. Well, this buyout, though, it makes it pretty clear the mayor really still wants him out.
Yeah, and the CTU is a big cog in this machine here, the Chicago Teachers Union, and they're aligned with the mayor, and all of these internal politics are bollocksing up this whole mess here when they ought to be putting their focus on kids.
Mm-hmm. While the power struggle is going on, we're seeing a growing number of principals and assistant principals backing Martinez, hundreds of them, rather.
Yeah.
I mean, has anyone here seen school principals get involved like this before?
I can't recall anything so publicly.
All heads are shaking here.
Right. I mean, certainly the principal's office or the principal's union is in the past clashed with former CPS CEO Janice Jackson. It is sort of fascinating to see them come out so publicly in support of them.
Letters being written and signed by hundreds of principals in favor.
Right, and I think it's kind of interesting with the buyout offer this week. I think that's almost a tacit acknowledgement from the mayor's side that they don't have cause to fire Pedro, which is what they would need to avoid paying a really hefty payout.
So do you think the mayor and teachers union that they're feeling increased pressure over how to get Martinez out before this newly elected school board takes control next month?
Yeah. I mean, that's the clock really is ticking because this also factors into the budget discussion. I mean,
exactly.
That's a $300 million that the city is going to have to shoulder, or the city government side is going to have to shoulder that they don't want to balance that budget.
Right, and teachers are still without a contract. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. I believe that the union is really trying to force the mayor's hand to or not the mayor's hand, just Pedro Martinez's hand in forcing him out and wrapping up a contract before the end of the year.
Well, they were talking about like 9% initially, right? And now they've rolled it back to 5 or 6% is their demand for.
We're hearing about a possible strike in February if there's no contract.
Yeah, you don't want to strike in January because you're going to have a lot of hot barrels with firewood burning in them otherwise because it's going to be cold. But yeah, it's another mess that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed with adults in the room.
Yeah. How shocking would it be, Melody, if they were to go on strike, given that the CTU played such a big role in actually getting Mayor Johnson into office?
I mean, that's just throwing another wrench, I think, in everything that the mayor has been experiencing from pushback from his own council. And if the teachers do end up striking, it'll be another what's supposed to be a good, harmonious relationship not looking so in a very public way.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we take a quick break, there was also a lot of political drama in South Suburban Dalton this week. Controversial Mayor Tiffany Henyard was thrown off the ballot for Thornton Township supervisor in what she's calling a rigged caucus. Has anyone been paying attention to this story?
Well, it's crazy.
It's just getting messier and messier.
Yeah.
What's happening there?
I was fascinated personally just by this caucus process. I was not aware of this for selecting for slating candidates. It's essentially a voice vote in a gymnasium, like you see, in the Iowa caucuses.
Yeah.
Like it's really like ground level democracy. Fascinating to learn.
Well, and Senator Napoleon Harris basically got everything rolling and then nominated himself for the job that Henyard has, and now he's slated with another group of people on his slate, and now she's trying to knock off people who are running against her in Dalton. So it's just another day of craziness.
Another day in Dalton. We'll be keeping an eye on that situation for sure in the week to come. Let's take a quick break here. We've been chatting with Melody Mercado of Block Club Chicago, Mitch Armentrout of the Chicago Sun-Times, and Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune. They're going to stick around, and we hope that you will too, because trust me, there's a lot more news to get to. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and we're back now with more of our weekly news recap. Now, before the break, we broke down the city's budget woes and mayoral staffing issues, but we still got a lot more news to cover.
Now to Mike Madigan, considered one of the most powerful men in Illinois political history.
New Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke was officially sworn into office today.
Calls today to stop clearing out a large tent camp in Humboldt Park.
We now have more information in the decision to keep the man accused of murdering Sonia Massey in jail.
Our panel today, Mitch Armentrout, government and politics reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times, Melody Mercado, who covers the Loop, River North, and the Gold Coast for Block Club Chicago, and Ray Long, Chicago Tribune investigative reporter and author of The House That Madigan Built, the record run of Illinois' Velvet Hammer. Since you literally wrote the book on Mike Madigan, Ray, how about you give us an update on week 7 in his corruption trial?
It's coming out like a fire hose out of court right now because they've been talking about everything from a so-called clout list of people that he recommended to J.B. Pritzker, and they were even pushing some after there had been raids at some of his colleagues or allies' homes in this federal investigation. And then we've focused now a lot on this deal in Chinatown, which there was a lot of discussion. It comes down to basically Danny Solis, the government mole, former alderman.
He got quite a flogging from defense attorneys, didn't he?
It was. I was there in the courtroom, and it was a brutal beginning when the defense attorneys came up to him because they had to air out all of his various, I don't even know if we can go into all that kind of stuff, but let's say a lot of peccadillos that had happened. And anyway, he had to go through all that. And what we've found out is more new tapes came out just yesterday involving calls between Madigan's co-defendant, Mike McLean, and Nancy Kimmy, a longtime lobbyist, former top aide to Judy Bartopinka. Kimmy has been one of these people who could operate on both sides of the aisle. McLean reached out to her because Solis wanted to develop a multi-use high-rise in Chinatown.
Mm-hmm.
Then he called out to Madigan because that land that the developers wanted was owned by the state. So Madigan talked to Solis about doing that and getting the land transferred, and Solis, of course, is zoning chair, so he could take care of the development zoning, and Madigan could get it moved if he could just get a bill through to do it. And that's where it got really thorny.
My goodness.
And and so.
And Solis gets to keep that $100,000 a year pension.
Six figure, yeah, nearly $110,000 he's pulling down. He's charged. A bribery charge is going to be erased. He's not going to have to go to prison, although he admittedly has committed all kinds of crimes like taking money for zoning, etc. So it is just pouring out of there. And the upshot was that this Nancy Kimmy and McLean tried. There was all kinds of internal politics involved. Teresa Ma, the Chinatown rep, stood up and said, the folks in the neighborhood don't want this. It got all bollocksed up. They tried to give it to Ma, the legislation, to Ma. She didn't want it. They tried to give it to a Republican rep who was handling the regular land transfer bill, and she didn't want it. She thought it was odd, and I've interviewed her before, and she thought it was just fishy. Just came in out of nowhere.
Wow. And Madigan's son, now he seems to also have benefited from his father's clout?
Yeah, there was another chapter that came out in court where a local nonprofit was asked to, well, it comes down to Madigan said something to Solis about, can you help out Andrew Madigan, the son, and as I understand it, then Solis was working with this local nonprofit, and they ended up giving Andrew Madigan some insurance business, and then the nonprofit group came back up in court yesterday and said, we made that decision on our own. So all these kinds of things are flying by at a rapid clip.
Never a dull moment in the Madigan trial. Let's move on from the Dirksen Federal Building over to the state's attorney's office. Eileen O'Neill Burke was sworn in as Cook County's new top prosecutor, Mitch, and she had some harsh words for the city.
Right, yeah, she kind of painted this, I wouldn't call it a bleak picture, but it wasn't the most uplifting view either. She kind of talked about how we've all grown numb to the numbers of gun violence in Chicago, which obviously is staggering on a weekly basis. But, she basically said she wants to sort of turn around that attitude, and she says the way is by going harder on alleged gun criminals.
Yeah, we'll talk more about how you expect her to be different from Kim Foxx on how she deals with crime.
Right. So Kim Foxx, obviously, probably one of the most polarizing politicians in Chicago over the last decade. Very progressive prosecutor, much more of a focus on restorative justice versus, lengthy prison sentences, and really a huge focus on, exonerating folks who were wrongly convicted. Frankly, there's not a lot of major differences in policy between Eileen O'Neill Burke and Kim Foxx. Eileen O'Neill Burke certainly, she said that she's still strongly behind a lot of those restorative measures. Where things start to differ a little bit is where Foxx faced a lot of heat over the last few years. Eileen O'Neill Burke says she's going to basically lower the standard for charging shoplifters with felonies.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the threshold under Kim Foxx was about $1,000.
Yes.
That's going to be down to about $300, I believe.
Yeah,
which is a state law.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right,
so,
right.
For more voters who are concerned more with the crime issue in Chicago, I think that's really playing to those folks. Beyond that, she says that she's going to work a lot harder to detain folks. Obviously, cash bail has been eliminated in Illinois, but prosecutors can ask judges to hold people in jail ahead of trial. And Burke says she's going to do that for folks who are charged with serious felonies involving guns.
Yeah.
Again, that's something that Kim Foxx did do, but it sounds like there's going to be more of an emphasis on that under O'Neill Burke.
Well, I beg to differ. I do think she had some harsh words. She compared Chicago to a war zone. right?
Well, I would say that Mayor Johnson would argue that's the kind of narrative that is very problematic for Chicago, given that crime has been decreasing, and especially when we talk about shootings, that particularly has been on a downward trend this past couple years. But yeah, I thought that was interesting as well.
That was very strong. Well, sticking with you, Melody, as we speak of crime, you actually published a heartbreaking story this week. It was about a West Loop mom and pop grocer. Give us the details.
Yeah, so it's a husband and wife duo, Go Grocer in the West Loop. Yes, it is a chain, but this is a franchise, so it is locally owned and operated small business. And that particular area of the West Loop has been hit hard by burglaries. And that particular location was hit 3 times in a 7-day span.
Oh, wow.
And so was another local business just on the road, Morgan Street Cafe, broken into 3 times over the course of 7 days. So the husband and wife duo told me that they've actually been staying at their shop overnight, staking it out to make sure that people don't come back. They actually they were hit twice successfully. Those were specifically targeting the ATM inside. The individuals were unable to take the ATM out. They tried to chain it to their car and drag it out through the window. Unsuccessful.
My goodness.
They came back a 3rd time, and the wife told me, they said, we really got tired of feeling like we could do nothing. And so we staked out in our car outside our business. And at about 2 a.m., they saw some folks drive by in like a dark colored Jeep and eventually pulled up to the front of their business and started the process of breaking in, and they called the cops.
I was going to say, they didn't try to confront them, did they?
No, they did not. They called the police. The police came, and the people fled.
I mean, what else are the police doing? This seems to be happening, as you said, in this area.
So police have said that they are going to be increasing patrol in the area. Of course, some of the business owners are still a little concerned because regardless, this is still something that's going on a somewhat consistent basis. The 12th District Police did do a business stroll in the area, stopping by, listening to some concerns from local business owners, dropping off flyers about how they can, what to do if their business is targeted for a burglary or a robbery, and sort of what they can do to better protect themselves. That includes installing security cameras, making sure that certain areas have alarms if it's open or broken into, making sure that it's brightly lit inside, that you don't keep a bunch of cash in the drawer, all those things that kind of seem
right. Safety 101.
Safety 101, but it's something that they want to reiterate in the area.
For sure. Let's turn to Springfield briefly here. The top prosecutor there is saying that he's committed to keeping a former Sangamon County Sheriff's deputy in jail. This is as he awaits trial in the murder of Sonia Massey. Sean Grayson's been in jail since his arrest back in July, but an appellate court ordered that he should be let out while awaiting trial. Now, the Sangamon County State's Attorney has asked the Illinois Supreme Court to review that decision, so we're going to keep an eye on that story as well. If you're just tuning in, this is Reset. I am Sasha-Ann Simons, and we are going behind the headlines in the weekly news recap with Melody Mercado of Block Club Chicago, Mitch Armentrout of the Chicago Sun-Times, and Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune. Now, just in time for winter, Mitch, we got a flurry of headlines alleging a McCormick Place manager accepted snowplow kickbacks.
That's right.
What's happening? This
is like a little bit. This is more like classic Chicago sort of graph.
It sounds like it,
but a lot less sophisticated than what the feds say Madigan has been up to down in Springfield. So these charges, my colleague Andy Grimm covered this trial. Not a trial, but the first stages of this trial yesterday in federal court. Basically, what the feds say is that the operations manager at McCormick Place, so basically the guy who's make everything is running smoothly over there.
Yeah, Dominic Gironda.
Correct. Basically, he called up his buddy James Sansone, allegedly, who's a snowplow contractor. And basically what they did was they found other snowplow drivers, subcontractors, who would then overcharge the city for plowing basically the truck marshaling yards around McCormick Place. So just kind of some quick cash that the feds say they racked up about $27,000.
Wow.
I think my favorite part about these charges, which should note that both men have pleaded not guilty, allegedly in text when they were talking about sort of setting up these overcharging situations, they called them, referred to them as bottles of wine, which kind of adds to the lexicon of Chicago graph terms. Ed Burke's tuna.
Goodness.
Go Cubs. That's an oldie. Yeah.
Boy, well, some of us who can't afford a snowplow were disappointed to learn that Mayor Johnson's budget includes no funding for the Plow the Sidewalks program that he championed on the campaign trail. Was anyone surprised by that?
It seems like these are the kinds of programs that are going to be cut right off the bat as you're trying to close $1 billion budget hole. But, we've still seen Alderman Dan LaSpada. He says that he's going to fight to make this happen. Hard to see it lasting till the end of the year. I don't know what you folks think.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like we're just going to have to get our shovels out.
Yeah. Time is ticking.
Like every other year.
Yeah.
Well, we can hope it's a dry Christmas.
I mean, sticking with weather, though, winter can be downright dangerous for the unhoused. Bitter cold combined with high winds on Wednesday contributed to a massive fire at a homeless encampment in West Suburban Elgin. Now, thankfully, no one was injured, but surrounding roads were shut down for hours. And because the encampment was near railroad tracks, Metro service was also disrupted. And that isn't the only homeless tent encampment that has had fires. It also happened at Gompers Park on the northwest side. Last week here on Reset, we had Illinois' homelessness chief, Christine Haley, to discuss the homelessness crisis. Here she is.
So in 2022, we understood that there were about 9,212 people who on any given night were experiencing homelessness in our city. We now understood from a count that was done in January of this year that rose to over 25,000 individuals.
And we've seen other reports showing homelessness in Chicago tripled between January 2023 and 2024. Now, today, Melody, the city's clearing Chicago's largest homeless tent encampment. That's in Humboldt Park. Now, this is not a story that you've been covering, but I know that your Block Club colleagues have. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, actually, my colleague Ariel attended a press conference this morning with Alderperson Jesse Fuentes, who has really, hit the ground running when she took office to try to address the issue of homelessness at Humboldt Park. This is something that has been in the works for over a year, and what that has entailed is reaching out, going individually to all these tents and trying to figure out what the needs were for these individual people to actually get them into, whether that be an apartment or shelter. And so starting today, there are signs posted. They've been posted for a while, but tents will not be allowed in the park overnight, and neither will overnight parking. And the goal for that is to clear out the park. But in addition to that, it's also they put in the work to make sure that everybody was going to be in some kind of housing situation so that they weren't spending the cold winter months in a tent in the park.
So what are the repercussions then if they don't leave? Can they be arrested or ticketed?
So it's been a little murky here. Definitely the goal is not to arrest someone, but it is to let them know that they are not allowed to, erect a tent in the park. There were some guidelines that were released this morning at the press conference that Ariel shared with me, and it shows that outreach workers and specific trained officers with CPD are supposed to stop by the tents, let them know, hey, you're not allowed to be resurrecting these. What kind of resources do you need? What kind of housing can we get you into? If they stick around, there's supposed to be some sort of notice that goes on the tent, and then after 24 hours, if it's still up, CPD can remove that.
Yeah. Are you hearing that some of them are refusing to leave?
Well, almost everybody has been paired with housing here. There are a few holdovers that are either waiting to be set up, relocated into their apartments or a specific shelter bed. But there are some residents that say that they don't want to leave, particularly they have resources around Humboldt Park that they frequent, some of that being health resources. There was someone that Ariel talked to who is getting surgery because they currently have cancer. They're getting surgery soon, and that is happening near Humboldt Park, and they would like to stay near the resources that they've been, accessing this whole time.
So the location's convenient.
Exactly. So we're not seeing a ton of people that are saying we want to stay in the park, but we are seeing a few.
Well, before we take a break, one last weather headline. Now, you wouldn't be able to tell this week, but Chicago did have its warmest year on record through the end of November.
I feel that.
Honestly, that seems like a distant memory. I feel like I'm lying to the people, but I promise it's true. We'll be back shortly with Melody Mercado of Block Club Chicago, Mitchell Armentrout of the Sun-Times, and Ray Long of the Trib. And we are back with more Reset. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons, and if you're just joining us, it is our weekly news recap. Before the break, we got caught up on what's been happening in week 7 of Mike Madigan's corruption trial, but we've got more stories to get to with local journalists Ray Long, Mitch Armentrout, and Melody Mercado. Now, since there was no news recap last week, I'm sure you all missed me. It was because of the holiday, of course. I got to ask, were any of you, Ray, Mitch, Melody, were you able to still have a good Thanksgiving despite the Bears' loss?
Oh, my goodness.
That was a tough one.
It was good until you said that about the Bears.
Sorry, I had to remind you.
Fortunately, I went to my sister's in Jacksonville, Illinois, a week before, and I was back in town. I had Thanksgiving with friends. It was a great time, despite the Bears.
Yeah. You watched the game too, Melody.
I did. My best friend is a Detroit Lions fan. So she's having the time of her life. She also went to Michigan. So she's having a good 2 years here. My fiance, on the other hand, Chicago born and raised, has been disappointed with the Bears for a very long time. But Thanksgiving, there was a little glimmer of hope, and then we fumbled the timeout at the end, and it was just so sad.
Yeah, what were you thinking in that moment, Mitch, when the clock was running out and the timeout was still there?
My first thought was the Bears actually have a shot to make a statement in a nationally televised game against arguably the best team in the NFL.
Yeah.
And then my second thought was there's no way that's going to happen. But I thought maybe they could force overtime. But just the pure coaching ineptitude that ended the game without a field goal attempt, timeout wasted. It couldn't have been more Bears. It really was. You just can't help but laugh.
Ray, you look so disappointed. I wish the people could see you right now.
Well, it was stunning. I mean, there's 30 or 40 million people watching, and they all know you should call timeout, and he doesn't call timeout. So Flus is gone.
Yeah,
and
it didn't take long after that loss for the Bears to fire Coach Matt Eberflus. I mean, were there any surprises in the room?
A Christmas miracle. Woke up the next day, my fiance and I were like, amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
They rolled him out. They even kind of botched the firing, too, because they rolled him out for a press conference. And he said, we're getting ready for the next game. And then a couple hours later, he gets the axe. It's
my goodness.
Crazy.
You've got to give the Bears credit for doing something that they haven't done before, which is fire a really bad coach in the middle of a really bad season. So that's good. But it's just, I guess you wonder, one, why didn't it happen before the season or several weeks ago? You'd like to have more hope with the new interim coach, Thomas Brown. He seems like a fun guy. I love his press conferences, much more interesting and engaging to hear from than Flus. But,
You think he's a good choice as the interim?
I think so. I mean, I don't know what the other options are.
Right.
But,
there's that.
More dynamic. I think he can bring the team together, and I think he's got a little more gravitas and respect than Flus had. And, Mitch just said it was a bad season, and that's correct. However, it could have been much better. They probably could have had at least 3 more wins if they'd had better coaching. And so you just really sit back and wonder what could happen if Brown puts all the pieces together and suddenly they win a few games here. He could be the coach of the future.
Interesting.
What's fascinating, too, is that, the Bears were so close in all their divisional games. And if he had managed to not trip over his own feet, Flus, that is, with some really questionable calls, I mean, he would certainly still have a job, and the Bears would
and like
be in
Ray
playoff
said, they
contention.
would have had at least 3 more wins.
Right.
And they
under their
could have
belt.
been in the playoffs. You know?
Well,
I was going to say, I think that speaks to having talent on the team, but just not having the right person to steer it. So I hope this means
fingers
some
crossed.
Positive change.
Maybe it is a Christmas miracle, like you said. Well, Eberflus, he wasn't the only coach fired this week because Chicago we can't get enough of this type of stuff. The Blackhawks also got rid of their coach, Luke Richardson. This season, they hold the worst record in the NHL. Anders Sorensen, who coached the Hawks AHL affiliate in Rockford, is going to take over as interim coach. Is this a kind of record for Chicago? 2 coaches fired in 1 week?
I mean, I believe, there's had even the Sky fired their coach a few months back.
Yeah.
The White Sox have had some turnover.
Three coaches in a quarter.
Oh, the White Sox.
Wow.
Or 4, 5?
Yeah, it's just really, we've entered a dark age for Chicago sports.
I do feel like every other recap, I'm giving some sort of update on a coach.
Yeah.
A Chicago coach.
And the
losing their job.
Blackhawks, they're not really at a stage where they're expected to be contending, but they're not supposed to be this bad. Again, they've got one of the most promising young stars in Connor Bedard, and the team has just not been able to build anything around him, which again is a familiar story. We've seen it in several other franchises around the city.
Right.
Yeah, and they had 3 championships not that long ago too. So you have to figure out how to, keep the vibrancy of the team, not just throw everybody away and start over.
Well, one more sports story here. Mitch, you recently reported on the Bears reaching an agreement with Arlington Heights. This is over property taxes.
Right. So the team is basically, and this is expected to be approved at a couple of public meetings next week out in Arlington Heights and among a few school districts. Basically, the Bears have a deal to pay a property tax rate of about $3.6 million per year as long as the former Arlington International Racecourse is vacant. This has really been, that property tax number had been the sticking point between the Bears and Arlington Heights and the local school districts who didn't want to be shortchanged on the amount of money that they were getting from the team.
Yeah.
The Bears had complained that assessment was too high, that they didn't want to pay that much, which is essentially what sent the team's focus back to the lakefront.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does this impact their stadium plans then?
They say that they're still focused on making it happen on the lakefront. They're still evaluating the Michael Reese site. But, when you've got this property tax deal out in the suburbs on land that you already own, it makes things a lot easier to go that direction.
Well, local journalists, we got some alarming news this week as newspapers continue to close across the country. Our state, Illinois, has been particularly hit hard. The state lost 86% of its journalists since 2005, which is the largest percentage lost in the entire country. And this is based on the Medill State of Local News report. Really hard to wrap your head around that number. What are y'all thinking? What comes to mind?
There are papers that are good, strong papers and have a good, strong reputation in this state that have been carved out. Peoria, Springfield, a variety of other papers. Smaller papers have closed. The Tribune, when it was bought by Alden Global, the overlords there immediately came in with buyouts. About 50 or 60 people took them. Mm-hmm. And then we struggled and finally got a contract. Just within the last couple of weeks here, we formed a guild 6 years ago and finally got the contract done under Alden. And, we got a couple of raises. We preserved the 401k. It was a solid contract, and, it was one of the few victories in the whole Alden chain.
Did you see this story, Mitch?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think we've all here, we've gone through those really harrowing rounds of layoffs at various media outlets.
Seeing it happen to our friends, our former colleagues.
It's painful. You don't want to see anyone lose their job, but obviously things have been tough in the industry for decades now. And, like Ray mentioned, I think it's important to note that the shops that are able to sort of stave off really drastic cuts, oftentimes you'll see that there are strong news reporters unions there who are fighting for that.
We're lucky to have a strong press, vibrant press still in Chicago, despite all the setbacks that owners try to give us.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. I mean, these corporations still find ways to carve out profits from these newsrooms. It's just a matter of them, them tearing away resources from that. So it's really frustrating in that sense that, there are, I think there are models to make things work from a financial perspective, but it's just more profitable to kind of just scrap it for parts.
Well, on that note, I want to shift over to some good news. I can't take it anymore. Let's turn to the holidays, Melody. Chris Kindle Market
Yes.
It's at Daily Plaza, and it's back.
It's back, everyone.
And they're doing something new.
They do have something new. Got to keep it fresh over there. They have a new 45-minute guided tour of the market grounds that's happening only during the weekends, and it's before the market opens to the public. I think this is really geared towards people who've maybe never been to the Kris Kringle market before, and really want to know what it's all about and get the best experience without the crowds. The tour is 45 minutes. It's $45. It includes
$1 a minute.
$1 a minute, if you think it's worth it. It includes a goodie bag featuring the souvenir boot-shaped mug, which I always get my souvenir mug every year. I try to, at least. And then you get just some other treats from local vendors within the market. I think it's a very interesting ad this year. We'll see if people take advantage and actually
I love
do
the
it.
idea of avoiding the weekend crowds.
Yeah.
So,
But that's also part of the experience, when you're crammed shoulder
Oh,
to shoulder
Mitch.
with 2,000 other people.
I want to fight someone
knew
for
you
my
would
hot
say that.
chocolate.
Yeah, spilling it over each other too. Yeah.
if you are going through O'Hare during the holidays, you can now pick up something sweet. This is from Southside favorite Brown Sugar Bakery. Now, they just opened a location in Terminal 3 at O'Hare. This is alongside Veteran Roasters, a coffee shop that hires unhoused and at-risk veterans. So if you're traveling anytime soon, that's a great place to stop.
Yeah, I will walk across terminals to get good food.
Exactly.
So-
Build that extra time
Yes,
in.
get the steps in.
Do the terminal check. We got to go check and make sure our terminal's there first,
just
right?
Look at it, make eye contact.
Make eye contact with your terminal. Then you go get food.
Yes.
Then you go back. I know you know what I'm talking about. Now, if you're looking for something sweet for your dog, you might want to head over to Ravenswood this Sunday for the Holiday Wagon Shop Market.
Wow, that's cute.
You're going to find a plethora of items for that special pup in your life. Do you have a dog?
I do.
Yeah.
And her name is Sasha.
No.
What a great name.
That's like the third dog with my
Really?
name that I've
We
met.
thought she had a special name.
Yeah.
Right.
It is a very special name. I would agree. Any other dog owners on the panel?
I'm in a double cat household. So
Double cat. Yeah, we talked about cats earlier this week on Reset, Mitch. You're late.
all my pets are gone now. So, but anyway, I think you ought to bring your dog next time.
Yeah. Maybe a dog massage or a
She would love
crocheted
that.
sweater.
Yeah.
A fancy collar.
She's outgrown her winter jacket, so she needs a new one.
Oh, okay, exactly.
there you
So the Holiday Wagon Shop Market is just for you.
Perfect.
All right, we'll leave it there. That's it for the weekly news recap with Melody Mercado of Block Club Chicago, Mitchell Armentrout of the Chicago Sun-Times, and Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune. Thank you all so much.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
And that is it for Reset. The show is produced by Meha Ahmed, Micah Yasin, Linnea Dominic, Ari Mejia, Andrea Guthman, and Jules Yeager. Dan Tucker is our executive producer. Ethan Schwab and Haley Bloomquist were our engineers this week. Monday on the show, Cook County is going after racial disparities in maternal health with a new and free doula program. We're going to dig into what this means for pregnant people. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Thank you for listening. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend, and we will meet again soon.